Hey guys, tonight we're heading to a town where secrets don't stay buried, especially when the ground's as dry as Red Hollow. Texas, a quiet place with wide skies, one traffic light, and a main street that smells like diesel and barbecue after rain. But even towns like that, the ones that feel safe enough to leave your front door unlocked, can hide something cold beneath the heat. Tonight's story begins with a man named Mark Preston, a dependable, clockwork kind of guy. 37, still living near his father's ranch house, and proud of the fact that in 14 years of driving high-end clients across Texas, he never once missed a job. But all it took was one black SUV, one ride he got into and didn't come back from for everything to unravel. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're tuning in from somewhere small and quiet like Red Hollow, let me know in the comments. Drop your city and local time. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up to soft boots on loose gravel. The last thing you remember was waving goodbye to a client outside the airport. It had been a long drive Dallas to Austin and back, but nothing out of the ordinary. Mark had his routes. He was known for being early, always choosing side roads, and carrying the same packed lunch in a steel thermos his mom gave him back in '04. That's why, when Mark doesn't call his dad the next morning, it feels wrong before it even feels scary. Edward Preston knows his son. They talk every Sunday, sometimes more. But 4 days pass. No call, no text, just a silence thick enough to press against your chest. Now you're standing in Edward's shoes, holding your phone, scrolling through Mark's last known location, outside a gas station near Canyon Creek. Cameras show him getting into a sleek black SUV, not a company car. No struggle, no hesitation. Just a man stepping into something unknown with a calm face. You'd think the cops would jump on that, but in small towns, a grown man vanishing isn't always treated like a red flag. Sometimes, it's just a man taking space. Maybe he needed time. Maybe it's not a crime. So for the first few days, you wait. You call his phone again. Straight to voicemail. You check hospitals. You ask around at the company garage. One dispatcher says Mark had taken a private client cash only. No official record. And when asked who booked it, she shrugs. It came through Lena. Now, you have a new name to repeat, like a question that keeps hanging in the air. Lena Whitmore. You drive past her house on the edge of Red Hollow. It's always quiet. Curtains never open. A crooked mailbox that hasn't seen mail in months. You don't knock. Not yet. Instead, you call Rachel, Mark's girlfriend of 6 years. You expect worry, panic. But what you hear on the other end chills your spine. Rachel says, "I got a message from him the day he vanished. Said he was hiding from someone. Said not to tell anyone or they'd get hurt." And then, almost as an afterthought, "Do you think he's alive?" It hits you sideways. Because if you had to bet, like really bet, chips on the table bet, your gut would say no. But your heart still wants to leave with the porch light on. You sit on that for a second. Because sometimes, grief doesn't start with a scream. Sometimes it starts with a voicemail that never gets answered. The town of Red Hollow doesn't make much of it, at least not at first. People disappear all the time, don't they? Get in too deep with something. Skip town. Maybe it's a fling. Maybe it's debt. Or maybe it's the kind of mistake you can't walk back from. Historians still argue whether small towns are better at hiding crimes or just worse at solving them. But one thing's certain, secrets ferment slower when everyone's pretending not to smell something off. And while you're stuck in limbo waiting for a knock, a clue, a call, the calendar pages start to blur. Edward keeps checking the gate at sunset. Rachel stops answering texts, and somewhere inside a house where the curtains never part, a woman is deciding whether to tell the truth or something else entirely. Still no body, no proof, just that black SUV. And if you're paying close attention, you'll notice something odd. The cameras caught Mark getting in, but not what happened after. Not where it went, not who drove it, and certainly not what it was hiding in the trunk. You don't remember the exact day it shifted from worry to something's not right, but Edward Preston does. He's standing in the sheriff's office with a folder full of printouts. Mark's last text messages, bank records, a grainy screenshot of the black SUV from the gas station camera. It's not evidence, not yet. But it feels like something. Edward doesn't raise his voice, doesn't wave his arms. He just says quietly, "My son wouldn't disappear without telling me." The deputy on duty, Jeffrey, maybe, says they'll keep an eye out. They type a few things into the system, log the report, suggest he wait a few more days. Adults vanish all the time, especially ones with known stressors. Edward grits his teeth. Mark had a few late bills and a bit of gambling, sure, but disappear into thin air. That wasn't Mark. He wasn't wild. He wasn't reckless. He was the kind of man who paid for groceries in exact change. And yet, here you are, sitting in a gray-walled sheriff's office with a coffee that's too cold and a folder that no one really wants to open. The waiting begins. Red Hollow is one of those towns where gossip moves faster than police reports. And just like that, stories start to swirl. Mark was running from someone. Mark was working undercover. Mark joined a cult in Amarillo, but there's no cult. There's just a man who didn't come home. And now there's something else. A red flag buried in Mark's financials. Edward gets a call from the bank. He's still listed as a secondary contact on one of Mark's older accounts. The bank flagged a shared savings account that Mark had recently opened with someone named Lena Whitmore, not Rachel, his girlfriend of 6 years, not a coworker, Lena. Edward stares at the name. There's not much in the account, just under $1,000. But it's not the money that sticks. It's the question. Why was Mark tied financially to a woman he barely knew? Because when Edward starts asking around, nobody can quite place Lena. She moved into town less than a year ago, rented a small house on Pine Hollow Road, keeps to herself, doesn't attend church, homeschools her 2 kids. No one remembers meeting her husband. Some folks say he left, others say she was never married at all. You can almost see it, can't you? That strange little house at the edge of town, shutters always closed. Driveway full of kids' bikes but no tire tracks. Like a diorama, nobody dusts. A fringe theory among some Texas folklorists says that houses with blackout curtains draw in secrets. It's probably nonsense, but it feels true here. Edward drives past Lena's place twice before he gets the courage to stop. He walks up the gravel path and knocks once, twice. Lena answers the door with a blank expression. Shoulder-length brown hair, no makeup, bare feet on cold tile. She looks like she hasn't slept and maybe hasn't wanted to. "Can I help you?" she asks, her voice clipped and even. Edward introduces himself. Her expression doesn't change. "I knew Mark," she says simply. "We were acquaintances." Acquaintances. Edward tastes the word like vinegar. "Why'd he have a joint bank account with you?" Her answer is quick, too quick. "We helped each other out sometimes. I was behind on bills. He wanted to help." The logic feels hollow, like someone painting over mold. Edward presses her, just a little, and she shuts the door. Later, when the police follow up, Lena repeats the same line. She barely knew Mark. They met at a gas station. He offered to help. No, she hasn't seen him in days. But here's where it gets worse. The last confirmed sighting of Mark was outside her house. That black SUV, it was parked in her driveway the morning after he vanished. You ever get that sinking feeling? The kind where your stomach drops before your brain catches up. That's what investigators start to feel. Still, no search warrant. Not yet. No confession. Just whispers. The sheriff assigns a detective named Mallory Reyes to quietly look deeper. Mallory's been around, worked cartel cases down in El Paso, even did a brief stint with the Texas Rangers. She doesn't rattle easy. She interviews Lena. The conversation is stiff. Lena doesn't blink much. Her answers are neat, almost rehearsed. Mallory asks, "Do you know where Mark Preston is?" Lena says, "I wish I did." "Did he ever mention feeling threatened?" "No." "Did he ever stay here?" Lena hesitates for half a second too long, then shakes her head. "No." But here's where it gets sticky. Lena's neighbor tells police a different story. Says he saw Mark's car parked outside multiple times. Says he heard arguing late one night. Says he thought it was domestic stuff and didn't want to get involved. Historians still argue whether American individualism is rooted in bravery or apathy. But in Red Hollow, silence often wins. Detective Reyes starts building her case, but it's like climbing fog. No body, no witnesses, and Lena. She's the kind of woman who could walk into a hurricane and still make her bed by nightfall. Then one evening, 11 days since Mark vanished, Edward gets a knock on his door. It's Rachel, pale, shaking, her phone clutched like it might explode. "I got another message," she whispers, and what it says: "Don't trust her. She lied about everything." You read that message again. Don't trust her. She lied about everything. No context, no follow-up, just those words. Sent from Mark's number. Rachel's hands tremble as she holds the phone out like it's cursed. The timestamp, 3:42. Night. That same morning. There's a part of you that wants to believe he's alive, that maybe he's somewhere with bad reception, ducking some kind of threat, laying low, but something inside twists the same way your stomach might when you find food still warm but no one home. Detective Reyes studies the message. The language feels familiar, short, direct, like Mark, but something's off. The signal tower trace shows it pinged from a cell site only a mile from Lena's house. Not from any far-off hideout, not from a runaway, just close. Too close. Rachel is still stuck in disbelief. She told the detective about the first message days ago, the one that said, "I'm in trouble. Don't ask questions. Don't tell my dad. I'll fix this." You think about that sentence, about how fear has a way of erasing punctuation, and how people in danger often say the exact opposite of what they need. Mark hadn't fixed anything, and if he was hiding, someone else knew where. Reyes asks Rachel, "Did Mark ever mention Lena to you?" Rachel looks confused. Lena Whitmore. Never. Who is that? The truth crashes like a slow train. Mark had two lives. Maybe not two families. Not quite, but two versions of himself. The professional, dependable chauffeur, and the one slipping money into a joint account with a woman no one knew. Detective Reyes pulls bank records again. This time, she notices something new, a withdrawal. 4 days before Mark vanished, he took out $500 in cash. That money is still unaccounted for. You imagine the scene. The feel of that many bills in your pocket, the weight of intention behind it. Was it a payoff? A debt? A mistake? Meanwhile, back at Lena's home, the lights remain off, the lawn's grown out, the mailbox leans a little farther. Her children haven't been to school in a week. A delivery driver swears he saw Lena wearing gloves in 90-degree heat, hauling garbage bags to her car. And then one night, the quiet ends. A call comes into 911 at 2:19. Now, a woman, sobbing uncontrollably, whispering, "She told me everything. I think she did it. I think my sister killed that man." It's Lena's sister, Madeline. She'd driven in from Dallas, worried about Lena's mental state, said Lena had been acting strange, isolating, hoarding food, talking to herself. But the night before the call, things got worse. According to Madeline, Lena gathered the kids in the living room, hugged them like they were leaving for camp, then whispered to her sister, "It's over. I didn't mean to, but he threatened my babies. I had to." Had to what? Police arrive at dawn. Lena doesn't run. She opens the door and says calmly, "You're late." That phrase will haunt the department for years. You walk through the arrest in Lena's shoes. No screaming, no struggle. She's barefoot, her children still sleeping. She places her hands out in front of her like she's used to doing it. Reyes is on site. She asks, "Is Mark Preston in this house?" Lena stares at her. Not anymore. The warrant is granted within the hour. Inside, the house is eerily clean. Surfaces wiped, trash bins empty. But in the garage, beneath a folded tarp and a stack of cardboard officers, find a blood-stained duffel. And inside it, a broken watch that belonged to Mark. A bootlace, frayed and stiff. Traces of hair. It's not a full body, but it's enough. And while forensics get to work, Lena sits in an interview room, sipping from a paper cup like it's tea time. She doesn't ask for a lawyer. She asks for her children. You start to hear her story. She says Mark had been threatening her, that he demanded repayment for loans she never agreed to, that he showed up at her house drunk, furious, shouting about what she owed him, that she tried to calm him down. But that night, she says, he pushed one of her kids, and in that moment, she did what any mother would do. "I protected them," she says softly. You don't know what to believe. Her face is blank, too blank. Her voice steady, too steady. Then she adds something strange. "You could have stopped this." She tells Reyes, "If you'd searched earlier, maybe he'd still be alive." That sentence rattles like a warning inside a tin can. Historians still debate whether remorse is stronger when spoken quietly, But Lena doesn't seem remorseful. She seems resolved, like someone who made peace with her decision long before anyone knew there was a decision to make. A local historian once said, "Red Hollow is a town where you can bury guilt deeper than bone. But guilt, like groundwater, always rises. Outside, reporters are already circling. Small-town tragedy makes for big headlines. Inside the interview room, Lena crosses her legs, looks out the tiny glass window, and sighs, like it's finally over. But it isn't, not even close. Now, you're back inside the timeline. 4 days after the arrest, the search expands. Lena isn't talking much anymore, at least. Not about where she put the rest of him, but she said enough to make the forensics team dread what they'll find. It begins with a trash route. Because remember, Lena didn't own a dumpster, but her block's collection day had been the morning after Mark disappeared. She'd wheeled out 2 black bags, heavy ones. Her neighbors recall her kids helping, small hands tugging at handles, unaware of what they were moving. The thought turns your stomach sideways. Detective Reyes follows the municipal logs to the transfer station 30 miles away. From there, everything gets crushed, sorted, dumped. It's a massive operation, metal arms, conveyor belts, the scent of bleach and rot. The team pulls 20 bags from the right time window. In the 5th bag, a blood-soaked rag and a receipt with Mark's name. The rest bones, fingers, skin comes slowly, piece by horrifying piece. But here's the part no one forgets. Each bag is packed with layers, freezer paper, duct tape, a child's drawing folded between them, a happy face, a sun with big yellow rays. A fringe group of forensic psychologists once claimed murderers who hide death in plain sight often choose domestic symbols cartoons, stuffed animals, sandwich bags. It isn't scientifically sound, but it's disturbingly poetic here. At the press conference, police say enough to settle public nerves, but not so much to reveal the full picture. They confirm a body, they confirm an arrest, they do not confirm motive, because Lena hasn't given one, not really. And when they bring her children in for a forensic interview, the heartbreak sharpens. Her oldest, a boy just 10 years old, recalls that night like a dream. Mom was cleaning a lot. He says, she kept the music on, said we were gonna take out the trash early, because it would get hot. He'd helped pull one bag. It was heavy. He asked if it was old clothes. His mom said yes. And the thing is, he believed her. Because kids do, they believe their moms even when they shouldn't, especially when they shouldn't. You sit in the interview room, watching through a one-way mirror, as the boy clutches a juice box and asks if his mom's in trouble. No one answers. Instead, the investigators refocus. They need the missing piece. The how. Back at Lena's house, they find a prescription bottle tucked inside a drawer. Cyclobenzaprine, a muscle relaxant. Not illegal, but when tested, its presence is confirmed in the small blood sample left in Mark's bootlace. Now you're starting to see it. The timeline gets rearranged like a puzzle you wish you hadn't opened. Mark wasn't killed during a struggle. He was drugged first. Detective Reyes confronts Lena. At first, she denies knowing what the drug is for. It's for my back, she says, deadpan. But then she adds something quiet. He wouldn't calm down. Reyes leans in. So you drugged him. Lena looks away. I needed time to think. Historians still argue whether intent matters more than action in courtroom morality, but in Red Hollow, this revelation cements one thing. This wasn't heat of the moment. This was a plan. Now, prosecutors shift gears. No more second-degree assumptions. They're building a first-degree case. And you wonder, how far back did this go? Rachel steps in again. She wants answers too. She's shown the messages. She stares at the phone. That doesn't sound like him, she says flatly. He never used the word hiding. And he never called anyone a liar. They do a forensic linguistics analysis. Turns out, the messages were written from a device Mark didn't own his SIM card swapped into an older phone. The style doesn't match his texts. Too fragmented, too emotional. Conclusion, Lena wrote them. That alone paints a new picture. Lena drugged Mark, sent fake text to throw off suspicion, killed him while he was paralyzed, and then involved her children in the disposal, knowingly or not. But here's the worst part. That Friday, during a second sweep of Lena's house, detectives find a notebook tucked under the lining of a storage ottoman. It's not a diary, it's planning. Bullet points, Dates, keywords. One reads, debt equals a threat equals a silence. No more asking. Another, drug plus control. Trash before sunrise. It's not quite a confession, but it's close enough to make the air go cold. You can't help but sit with the thought. Lena didn't snap. She prepared. She practiced. She made a list. And Mark never even saw it coming. So now you're standing in the heart of it. One man missing. Now confirmed dead. A woman in custody. A pair of children unknowingly caught in the machinery of murder. And a small town doing what small towns do best, dividing itself neatly in two. On one side, those who say Lena was cornered, a desperate mother, drowning in debt, pushed too far by a man she barely knew how to escape. On the other, a growing chorus that sees something colder, calculated, controlled, clinical. And here's where the money finally talks. Detective Reyes gets a warrant for Lena's full financial history. It isn't just Mark's name that pops up. There are two other men who had sent Lena money over the last 6 months, both small transfers, a few hundred each. Both transactions marked as emergency loan. Neither of those men, it turns out, are local. One of them tells investigators that Lena told him her ex-boyfriend was violent and she needed money to disappear. The other said she promised repayment from a settlement she was expecting. Neither of them had heard from her since. Now you start to feel it, that spider thread trail of manipulation running through Lena's quiet little life. Reyes begins mapping a pattern. Lena reached out to multiple men, always with some version of the same story. She was scared. She was in danger. She needed help. Sometimes it was framed as romantic, sometimes maternal, always urgent, and always with the promise, I'll pay you back when I can. If you're picturing a desperate con, you're not alone. There's a word for this kind of behavior: coercive survivalism. Fringe sociologists describe it as a moral gray zone used by people, often women, trapped between fear and manipulation. But the jury doesn't read academic journals. They see Lena's receipts. One particularly damning purchase: a handsaw bought 3 days before Mark disappeared. You try not to imagine it, but it's there, recorded in dull ink. May 14th, paid in cash. Store security footage shows her in a gray hoodie, sunglasses, and gloves. Lena said she never planned anything, but the saw says otherwise, and the timeline gets even more brittle. Rachel gives Reyes something she'd nearly forgotten about an old email Mark forwarded to her months earlier. It's from Lena. The subject line: repayment schedule. The body of the message is careful, like something copied from a loan contract template online. Reyes compares the language from the fake texts, the notebook, and the email. Forensic linguistics confirms it's same author. So Lena wasn't just reacting. She was building a narrative long before Mark ever disappeared. But here's the kicker. In her final interview before the trial, Lena says something odd, something small, but it sticks. He told me he'd ruin me, that he'd tell people about the money, about what I asked for. What did you ask for? Reyes asks, leaning in. Lena smiles, just a little. Protection. Historians still debate whether memory becomes weapon or shield in courtrooms like this, but in that moment, Lena uses it like a smoke bomb. Suddenly, it's not about what she did, it's about what she feared. She claims that Mark was threatening her family, that he'd grown violent, that the money was never enough, that he used their connection to manipulate her, that she didn't plan anything, she was cornered. And some people believe her. Because here's the thing about Red Hollow. It's full of people who've known fear. Small towns bury a lot of trauma under polite nods and tight-lipped greetings. And the image of a woman protecting her children well, that resonates. But the prosecution isn't interested in feelings. They're interested in facts. They present the prescription, the saw, the notebook, the financial trail, the false messages sent from Mark's SIM card, the calculated disposal. They present what Lena's kids saw and didn't see, and they ask the courtroom, does this sound like fear or a plan? There's no good answer. You're in the gallery now. You can feel the tension clinging to the walls. It's the kind that doesn't break even when someone sneezes. A woman in the front row clutches her cross so hard the chain snaps. On the witness stand, Lena stares straight ahead. She never cries, never raises her voice, and never admits guilt. She just says again, I was scared. Scared enough to buy saws. Scared enough to drug a man. Scared enough to clean her floors before sunrise, now the focus shifts. You're no longer in the crime scene, or even the courtroom. You're standing at the edge of that shuttered house on Pine Hollow Road, trying to figure out who Lena Whitmore really is. Because even now, with evidence stacked high and the DA circling like a hawk, you can't quite pin her down. Villain, victim, something in between. Her story, what little of it she offers, unfolds in fragments. No one knew much about her before Red Hollow. She'd shown up just over a year ago, rental agreement signed under her maiden name. 2 kids in tow, no job listed. She told neighbors she'd moved to start over. But when Detective Reyes digs deeper, she finds a trail that's barely been swept. Lena was born in Shreveport, married once, briefly. Hospital records from 2014 show a domestic violence report her as the accused. The charge was dropped. A year later, she moved to Fort Worth, enrolled her son in a preschool under a new last name. Another short stint, another quiet disappearance. You follow the trail through addresses like fading footprints in the sand. Everywhere she goes, it's the same pattern. Arrive quietly, rent something cheap, keep to herself, leave without saying goodbye. There's a fringe criminology theory known as geographic dissociation, the practice of moving repeatedly to prevent roots from revealing rotten soil. It's debated, naturally. Some say it's survival. Others say it's strategic erasure. Lena's life fits it too neatly. In Red Hollow, she volunteered once at the library. She borrowed cookbooks but never returned them. Signed up for a parenting group but never showed. Always on the edges, always nearly present, never fully there. Her kids, sweet, polite, clean clothes, quiet voices. They never drew attention, never raised red flags. But their teachers now remember something odd. When asked to draw their families, they never included a father. When asked what their mom did for work, one of them said, "She fixes things." You don't forget a sentence like that. It gets passed around town like a riddle. By now, the trial is a week in. Prosecutors are rolling out everything. The texts, the saw, the fake alibis, the notebook, with her disturbingly neat handwriting. But the defense pushes back hard. They paint Mark as manipulative. They bring up his gambling debt. They suggest he loaned money to women and pressured them when they couldn't pay. They even show a single, poorly lit photo of Mark at a bar with a woman who isn't Rachel. Suggestive, sure. Damning, not quite, but enough to make the jury shift in their seats. Now yabber in their heads. 12 strangers, tasked with choosing between 2 uncomfortable truths. That a mother planned a killing so cleanly, she made her children accessories without their knowledge. Or that a man with a dark side finally pushed the wrong person too far. Historians still argue whether juries lean more on emotion or logic in female perpetrator cases. But one thing is clear, they notice her. Lena doesn't wear makeup to trial, wears the same cardigan 3 days in a row. Her hair stays tied in a low bun. Her eyes rarely meet the gallery. And when she testifies, she only says this: "He scared me. He knew things. He made threats. I didn't want it to happen like that." No tears, no shaking. The kind of performance that's either completely authentic or perfectly rehearsed. Rachel takes the stand next. She's cold, blunt, and furious. She tells the jury, if he was scared of anyone, it wasn't me. It wasn't debt. It was her. She tells them how Mark had planned to cut off contact with Lena, how he'd felt she was getting too close, that he was going to close the shared account the week he disappeared. And just like that, Moti, it becomes something sharp. You feel it in the air. A shift. The courtroom isn't sure if it's sympathy or suspicion they're breathing in. But they know the difference now matters. Because if Lena planned it, drugged him, staged the messages, played the victim, then this isn't just a tragic mistake. It's murder. And if that's true, then the worst part might be this. She made her children take out the trash. You don't want to be the 911 operator that night. It's late, rain tapping softly against the glass. Calls are slow, mostly weather reports, a couple noise complaints, and then the line clicks over. A voice, shaky and desperate. "I think my sister killed someone." She said it. She said it. The dispatcher tries to steady. The woman gets her name, her location. Madeline Whitmore, Lena's older sister. She's been in town for less than 48 hours. Says she came after Lena called her crying, asking for help with something bad. She hadn't seen Lena in person in over 2 years. They'd talked off and on, mostly about the kids, But this call was different. She tells the dispatcher she said she couldn't do it anymore, that she didn't want her kids to grow up with blood on their hands. You replay that phrase again and again. Not guilt, not trauma. Blood. Madeline says Lena was pacing the living room when she arrived, cleaning compulsively, whispering things she couldn't quite make out. She hugged the kids, one by one. She tells detectives later. Then she looked at me and said, "Tell them the truth when they're old enough." It's the kind of confession that doesn't come with fireworks or wailing, just a whisper, a tired drop of poison on the tongue. By the time police arrive, Lena's back in her room, sitting on the edge of the bed, palms resting on her knees. The kids are asleep in the next room, music playing softly. Brahms' lullaby, looping. She doesn't ask why they're there. She doesn't ask who called. She just says, "I told her to wait. You were coming." They take her in without cuffs. It's not resistance, they say she just stands, as if expecting it. As if this, finally, is the part of the script she rehearsed the most. Reyes interviews Madeline that same night. Her story is raw, not polished like Lena's. She talks about growing up in a house where silence was survival, where their mother believed in never airing dirty laundry, even if it stank up the whole damn block. She remembers Lena being strange even then. Not violent, she says, just cold. She'd lie even when she didn't have to. She pauses. Sometimes, I think she practiced. You're not sure what that means until Madeline tells the story. How, when they were kids, Lena once pretended to be sick convincingly, faked a fever with a lamp and wet towels, stayed home from school for 3 days. Their mom never knew. It wasn't about skipping class. It was about seeing if she could pull it off. That's the part that stays with you. Back in the present, the trial is moving fast. The prosecution has a momentum now. The evidence is airtight. The testimony lands sharp, but they still need a why. And this is where the defense tries one last gambit: emotional instability. They bring in a psychologist who's never treated Lena but reviewed her background. He tosses around phrases like complex trauma, reactive survival instincts, and possible dissociation. But the prosecution cuts through it with one document, Lena's handwritten to-do list. The one with the line, drug plus control, trash before sunrise. There's a pause in the courtroom after that one. The kind that tastes like copper. Historians still argue whether intent can ever be proven with handwriting, but this time, the list feels like a weapon. When Lena is asked directly on the stand if she wrote it, she doesn't deny it. She just shrugs and says, "I don't remember." It's the same answer she gives to 3 other key questions. But memory loss isn't the defense they're running. And you can feel the jury noticing that too. Meanwhile, the kids are staying with Madeline now. Child Protective Services arranged temporary guardianship. They've been kept away from the courtroom, away from reporters, away from the words dismemberment and duffel bag. But one drawing makes it into evidence. Found inside Lena's house, in a stack of schoolwork. It's a picture of their family. 2 kids, a mom, and someone else. A stick figure, colored in with black crayon. No face, no arms, just standing there, beside a trash bag. The child labeled it, that day. It's not clear what the child meant by it. Maybe nothing, maybe everything. But when it's passed around the jury, you see shoulders shift. You hear someone in the gallery gasp, "You remember the juice box interview? The little boy asking if his mom was in trouble." And you think, no one should ever have to wonder that. You're in the courtroom the morning they play Lena's arrest interview. The lights dim slightly, a small screen flickers to life. The jury leans in, and there she is, Lena Whitmore, sitting in the corner of a beige interview room, arms folded, jaw tight. She's not crying. She's not shaking. She's waiting. Detective Reyes's voice comes through the speakers, measured, calm. "Lena, can you tell me what happened to Mark Preston?" There's a pause on the video. Lena stares down at her hands, fingers tracing circles on her wrists. Then she says, flatly, "He came to my house. He was angry. I asked him to leave. He wouldn't." And then another pause. She glances at the mirror on the wall like she knows who's behind it. "I tried to calm him down. I gave him something, just to make him stop yelling." "What did you give him?" "A pill. I didn't want to hurt him. I just needed time to think." This is the moment, the slow turn. You feel it like a drop in temperature. Reyes asks the question everyone's been waiting for. "And when he passed out, what did you do?" Lena breathes in. "I panicked. Not I called for help. Not I shook him awake. Not I ran. Just I panicked." Then, he threatened my children. I had no choice. On the screen, Reyes remains silent, just lets the pause stretch, and Lena keeps going. Not with trembling confessions, not with shame, but with logistics. I wrapped him in sheets. I used the garage. I tried to make it fast. That word tried hangs like a slow drip in an empty room. Historians still argue whether women confess differently than men, whether they frame violence in caretaking language, in practicality, not rage. But Lena's words feel colder than that, as if she's describing a task, not a life. She describes placing the body in trash bags. She describes organizing pickup times. And most hauntingly, I told the kids we were getting rid of old clothes. After the video ends, no one speaks right away. The silence feels almost sacred. One juror covers their mouth, another stares down at the floor, blinking rapidly. And then Reyes stands to testify in person. She tells the court Lena never asked about where Mark's body was going, never showed concern over how her children would recover, never once mentioned remorse. She said she protected them. Reyes says, but what she protected most was the lie. Then comes the twist no one saw coming. Madeline, the sister, takes the stand one last time. She hesitates before speaking. You can tell she hates being here, not just because of the press or the cameras, but because she's realizing the woman she tried to protect might have been capable of this all along. She asked me once, Madeline says slowly, what would happen if someone just vanished? Like legally. The courtroom stiffens. When was this? About a month before Mark disappeared. And what did you say? I told her people don't just vanish, that someone always comes looking. Madeline looks down, then adds, she said, not if you make them disappear, right? It's one of those quotes that rewires the room. Suddenly, everything Lena claimed fear, panic, desperation starts to feel like a script she'd been workshopping for weeks. Back at Lena's house, the investigators had missed something small in their first pass, a receipt taped under a kitchen drawer, a grocery list, but not for food. Batteries, bleach, zip ties, gloves, a heavy-duty tarp, all purchased across 4 different stores, all in the 2 weeks leading up to Mark's disappearance. You start to understand what Reyes meant by building the lie. Because Lena didn't panic, she prepared. One fringe behavioral analyst once wrote that the scariest murderers aren't impulsive, they're patient. They don't lash out, they make lists and check them twice. Now, the prosecution rests. The evidence is done. The testimony is finished. All that's left is the defense, but they don't have much to offer. A plea of fear, a whisper of trauma, and a hope that the jury will see a mother, not a killer. But even her children's innocence can't shield her now, especially not when they remember things they were never meant to carry. Like how mom made them throw out the bags quickly, how she didn't let them look inside, and how she kept saying, no one will ever hurt us again. You're in the courtroom gallery now. It's the final day before deliberations, and the air is heavy, the kind of quiet where everyone's breathing through fabric, holding back coughs, clutching tissues for reasons they don't admit. The judge gives the jury their instructions. Legal terms swirl intent, premeditation, reasonable doubt. But what really sticks with them isn't the jargon, it's the imagery. It's Lena's flat voice on that recording, the children's drawings, the phrase, I told them it was old clothes. And now, with the jury sequestered, the town of Red Hollow braces itself. People stop talking about weather and start whispering about her. You hear theories over coffee at the diner, at gas stations, even whispered in the church foyer. She was abused before, maybe she snapped. She knew exactly what she was doing. She's a mother. She was protecting her babies. She's a monster. And in that swirl of opinion, you notice something odd. No one talks much about Mark, even now. He feels like a ghost on the margins of his own murder. Historians still argue whether certain victims get remembered more as symbols than people. Mark becomes a cautionary tale, not a person. A lesson. But his father doesn't forget. Edward Preston attends every single day of the trial, wears the same brown coat, pressed shirt, brings a yellow notepad, though he never writes anything down. He watches Lena like he's waiting for something, anything. A blink of regret, a crack in her posture, a whispered apology. He never gets it. On the 8th day, the jury returns. They've been out for just under 4 hours. Fast, but not rushed. Focused. Everyone stands. The foreperson, a retired nurse, reads the verdict. We, the jury, find the defendant, Lena Whitmore, guilty of murder in the first degree. You'd think there'd be a reaction, screams, weeping, but instead, Lena just closes her eyes, one long blink, and then she opens them again, still calm, still composed. Sentencing comes next, life in prison, no parole. The judge is stern, but not angry. He doesn't grandstand. He simply says, "You have committed a crime that affects not just one man, but every person who loved him and every child who trusted you." Lena doesn't look at the judge. She looks at the gallery, at Madeline, at Edward. Then she leans toward her lawyer and says, audibly, "At least my kids are safe." It's the only sentence she speaks after the verdict. And it's one no one can forget, because safe doesn't feel like the right word anymore. Not when your mom taught you how to carry garbage you shouldn't have touched. After the trial, a few local papers run pieces trying to summarize it all. One headline reads, "Mother or Murderer? Town still torn over Lena Whitmore." Another, quieter one in the back pages simply says, "Justice for Mark." But even that feels incomplete, because justice rarely feels clean, not in Red Hollow, and not when children have to unlearn what love looks like. Detective Reyes, in her last interview on the case, says something that sticks. The scariest part wasn't what she did, it was how calmly she planned to survive it. The children are relocated out of state. Madeline takes custody permanently. No more press, no more drawings. She changes their last names, lets them forget, or tries to. And Lena, she's moved to a state facility outside Houston. Quiet inmate, no behavioral issues, keeps to herself, teaches a GED prep class, makes origami birds out of scrap paper. One guard says she folds them every night before lights out, always 3. One big, 2 small, she leaves them by her window, facing the glass, facing out. You're standing in Edward Preston's backyard now. It's dusk. The crickets are loud. The porch light flickers. The old dog, Moose, doesn't move much these days. Just lifts his head when the breeze shifts. Edward's out here every evening now. Not for the view, for the habit. He still keeps Mark's old car washed. Still starts it once a week, just to keep the engine honest. Still keeps a drawer full of his son's pay stubs and company badges. For a man who lost everything, he hasn't let go of anything. And there's a reason. He doesn't want Mark to be forgotten. Because the town already started to move on. People don't mean to be cruel. It's just how time works. New stories come, new gossip. Lena fades into myth, her name said in hushed tones between traffic lights. But Edward, he's still frozen at the stop sign where Mark vanished. Historians still debate how communities grieve, whether they rally around the victim or push them into legend. But Red Hollow seems to prefer forgetting. It's safer, cleaner, and if you ask around, you'll still find people, yes, even now, who think Lena might have had a reason. They say things like, "It's not like she just snapped. He did have debt, didn't he?" You never really know what goes on between two people, which is another way of saying, maybe he deserved it. And that makes Edward furious in a way he never speaks aloud. He just cuts his lawn with military precision, paints his fence twice a year, and every Sunday, he walks to the diner where Mark used to order French toast and leaves $20 under a napkin with his son's name written on it. Rachel, meanwhile, moved out of Red Hollow completely. She lives in Austin now, works at a non-profit that helps people escape financial abuse. Sometimes she gives talks. She never mentions Mark by name, but she always ends with the same quote, "It's not love if you're the only one losing sleep." And Lena, she's been in prison for 2 years now, inmate 41129. Always quiet, keeps a routine. Her cell is bare, save for a few legal pads, some paper cranes, and one old library book she never returned. The Art of Folding. A guard once asked her if she felt regret. She smiled, tilted her head, and replied, "I regret trusting the wrong person." Mark, she didn't answer. But everyone knew that was the last time anyone asked. The kids, they're doing better than most expected. Therapy twice a week. New names, new school, a cat named Orbit. They're too young to remember everything, but old enough to remember something. The youngest once asked Madeline if they'd ever go back to Red Hollow. Madeline just shook her head. "There's nothing there for us." And maybe she's right, because the house was sold, the SUV impounded, the trash route rerouted, even the gas station where Mark was last seen. gone, replaced by a vape shop. Time bulldozes everything, eventually, but not memory, and definitely not justice. Because here's the truth that no one prints. Mark was a good man, flawed, sure, wounded, but he was trying to pay back what he owed, trying to help someone who never deserved it, trying to make a life with Rachel. And in the end, all he got was a quiet vanishing in a town that couldn't decide whether to light candles for him or pretend it never happened. The fringe legal writer Amelia Crass once said, "Some crimes aren't about power or rage or passion. They're about control and the illusion that if you just plan enough, you won't have to pay for it." Lena planned and she paid, but only after taking a man, a future, and a family with her. Now, the courtroom is empty. The reporters are gone. The jury's back at their normal lives' grocery lists, missed dentist appointments, forgotten verdicts. But you're still here, inside this quiet place where voices once echoed. You sit in the chair where Mark's father sat. The grain of the wood is smooth, worn by grief, stained by time. This is where stories like his tend to fade, unless someone keeps telling them. You pull up the file Detective Reyes assembled, the final version. Her notes are organized, clipped neatly together. There's a line scrawled in red ink across the cover. If you're reading this, the system worked too late. Because here's something that didn't make the news. Reyes had tried twice to push for a search warrant before Lena's sister ever called. Based on the shared bank account, the false alibi, and Lena's inconsistent statements, but the DA said it wasn't enough. No physical evidence, no probable cause. That's how close they were. Historians still argue whether law enforcement should lean harder on intuition or stick to due process, but in this case, hesitation cost time, and time cost a life. You flip through the pages, there's a map, a disposal timeline, a psychology profile, but one page stands out. A single sheet with a photograph. It's from an old Polaroid. Mark and Rachel leaning on his car, faces half sunlit, both smiling like they forgot the world existed. His arms around her shoulder, her hands on his chest. The photo's labeled simply 3 weeks before, and now, years later, it doesn't look like a memory. It looks like a warning. Because Mark had already opened that shared account with Lena, had already made promises, already crossed a line between help and complication. It's easy, isn't it, to do one small thing, help a neighbor, lend money, smooth over a favor, and not realize you've stepped into a story that doesn't end well, especially when that neighbor has a mind for lists. Meanwhile, in prison, Lena has applied for a transfer, minimum security. She claims she wants access to more classes, more books. She writes letters no one receives. She's tried reaching out to her children through legal channels, but Madeline blocks every attempt. She's listed a new emergency contact, a pen pal in Michigan who believes she's innocent, because there's always someone who believes. And if you listen closely, you'll hear echoes of her supporters online. They write things like, "She did what she had to. Why isn't anyone talking about the abuse she went through? He manipulated her financially. Maybe some of it's true. Maybe none of it is. But what's undeniable is this: Lena made a plan, and Mark never made it home." There's a final note in Reyes's file, scribbled in the margin like an afterthought. I think she wanted to be caught. She just wanted to pick the moment. And that moment, if you remember, was when she looked at her sister and said, "Tell them the truth when they're old enough." Not if, when. Because some lies aren't built to last. Especially not in a town where trash gets picked up before the sun rises. Now you're sitting in the passenger seat of Mark's car. Not in real life, obviously. The car's been impounded, auctioned off, resold to someone who doesn't know what happened in Red Hollow. But in memory, in this story, you're there. The seats adjusted perfectly. Mark was tall, not a scratch on the dash. There's a faint smell of pine from an old air freshener hanging limp from the rearview mirror. And in the glove compartment, a receipt for burgers, 2 of them, one with no onions, dated the night before he vanished. So here's what you picture. Mark, parked at the edge of the town, handing off the second burger to someone in the passenger seat. Maybe Lena, maybe not. Maybe this wasn't even the last night. Maybe it was just another moment that didn't seem important until it did. Because isn't that always how it goes? You look back and realize the small moments were really the loudest ones. Historians still argue whether human memory is built around facts or feelings, But trauma, that rewires the architecture, makes a fast food wrapper seem louder than a siren. In Lena's trial transcript, there's a brief moment buried deep on day 7, a question asked by the prosecution. Do you remember what he said to you when you gave him the pill? And Lena, for the first time in days, actually hesitates. Then she says, he said, "Thank you." It sounds made up, or ironic, or heartbreaking, maybe all three. Because if that's true, if Mark thanked her, thinking it was something to calm him, help him, make things better, then the horror isn't just in the murder, it's in the trust. And what she did with it, you walk yourself through the logic. Just like Reyes must have, Mark's finances were spiraling. He saw someone in trouble, Lena, and tried to help. Not because he was reckless, because he was tired of being alone. Because maybe, on some level, he liked feeling needed. And Lena, she was spiraling, too. Not in the way people usually picture. She wasn't frantic or broken. She was still quiet, controlled, dangerous in the way that looks harmless. She didn't lash out, she planned. She didn't scream, she waited. And when Mark trusted her enough to close his eyes, she made her move. There's a fringe theory in forensic psychology called mutual masking, where two broken people gravitate toward each other because their flaws fit like puzzle pieces. Mark had shame, Lena had silence. He wanted to protect, she wanted control. You sit with that, maybe too long, until the memory of Mark's voice starts to feel like your own. Until you start wondering how many decisions you've made that you never realized were red flags disguised as kindness. Because it isn't always the monsters that get you. Sometimes, it's the people who whisper, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it," and mean it in the wrong way. Back in Red Hollow, the town continues to shift. The grocery store changed ownership. The school, Lena's kids once attended, now holds an annual fundraiser for victims of domestic violence. The irony doesn't go unnoticed. Detective Reyes has been reassigned. She declined to speak further about the case, but in her final note to the DA, she wrote, "The system asked for evidence. It got a body, but what it didn't get, what it still doesn't know, is how many warnings we missed before it was too late." She's not wrong. Because the case files show at least 5 people, 5 who noticed something odd about Lena and said nothing. And maybe that's the final tragedy. Not just what happened, but how many people didn't ask the second question, didn't follow the instinct, didn't knock one more time. You sit in that passenger seat, now miles from where it all happened, and you think, Mark didn't die because he trusted the wrong person. He died because the right ones stayed silent. You're back at the trial now, not in the gallery this time, but in the jury box. You're one of the 12. You've sat through every moment, the blurry photos, the emotionless testimony, the paper cranes and the children's voices, recorded behind glass. You've heard arguments from both sides, each clawing towards something resembling truth. And now, you're staring at Lena Whitmore. You don't know what to call her. Defendant sounds too clean. Killer feels too final. Mother feels too wrong. She's just Lena. And that's what makes this so hard. Because the question isn't just did she do it. Everyone knows she did. She admitted most of it. The body, the bags, the drugs. That's not the debate. The question is, why? The judge's instructions echo in your mind. First-degree murder requires proof of intent, premeditation, conscious planning. But Lena didn't scribble murder on a wall in red paint. She didn't scream at the top of her lungs. She whispered. She packed a bag. She bought supplies. She wrote a list. And she made sure her kids didn't look inside the bags. You look down at your notes. You wrote that line 3 times. I told them it was old clothes. It won't leave you alone. Historians still argue whether motherhood offers a natural shield in courtrooms. Whether jurors, especially in small towns, lean more gently on women who say they were afraid, who say they were protecting their children. But fear doesn't buy saws, and fear doesn't send fake texts at 3 a.m. What nags at you is the contradiction. Lena had a choice. She could have run, she could have called the police, she could have told Rachel or Edward, or even her sister, but she didn't. She waited. She drugged him. And then, as she told Detective Reyes in that flat, surgical tone, I made it fast. Only you know and she knows that it wasn't fast, that it took time, that even dismembering someone calmly and quietly takes hours. Planning takes longer. And in that time, she could have stopped. She could have changed her mind. Instead, she double knotted the trash bags and put her kids to bed. Back in the jury room, one person hesitates. They say, but what if she really thought she was protecting them? You want to believe that? God, you want to, but the evidence says otherwise. That notebook, the supply receipts, the pill bottle tucked where no child would ever find it. She didn't panic. She prepared. There's a fringe legal concept called constructive malice. It means a person doesn't need to hate their victim, they just need to treat them like a problem to be solved. Lena treated Mark like math, a solvable equation. She found the solution, executed it, cleaned up. You stare at the verdict form. There are only 2 boxes to check. You're not allowed to write a third one. This is all too awful to understand. So you do what's required. You vote guilty, first-degree murder, and you sit with the weight of it. Because even though you've done the right thing, nothing about this feels like justice. Not when a man is dead, not when 2 children are rewriting their lives in therapy, not when a woman who could have cried for help chose to clean the blood instead. Outside the courthouse, it's quiet. No protesters, no applause. Just that strange, suspended stillness. You only get after something breaks. Rachel doesn't stay for the sentencing. She walks out the side door and doesn't look back. Edward does. He stands in the courtroom long after everyone else has gone, just looking at the floor where Lena sat. Then, almost like a ritual, he mutters something. You can barely hear it. He would have forgiven her. But I never will. You find yourself back in that prison corridor. Now cool cement walls, fluorescent lights flickering just a beat too slow, and that antiseptic smell that somehow clings to your skin even after you leave. Lena's been here for nearly 2 years. She hasn't spoken publicly since the trial. No interviews, no letters released, just silence. The same kind she wrapped herself in back in Red Hollow, the same kind she weaponized. But here, she's no longer in control, and yet, she's still composed. The guards say she wakes early, makes her bed with surgical corners, reads 3 books a week, teaches GED math to 3 other inmates who joke that she could have been a librarian if she didn't kill a guy. She laughs softly at that. Her cell is sparse, no photos, no color, just rows of folded paper birds, always 3. 1 larger, 2 smaller. Every night, she lines them up on her windowsill, as if waiting for something to land, or someone to remember. Her children don't write, and she doesn't ask why. But the truth is, she knows, because silence was the weapon she handed them. 2. Historians still argue whether high-functioning female offenders internalize guilt or simply bury it deeper than most. But even fringe psychoanalytic studies agree on one thing. Some women don't confess because they don't believe they're guilty. They believe they were right. And that's the thing about Lena. She never said she was sorry. She said she was scared. And now, she says nothing at all. The only person who still visits is her pen pal, Darren, a former trucker from Michigan who started writing after reading about her in a Reddit thread. He believes she was railroaded, thinks she's too smart to have done something so sloppy. She plays along, answers his letters, mentions the books she's reading, thanks him for the postage stamps, but she never tells him what happened. Because what happened isn't a story, it's a calculation. And Lena doesn't share her math. Meanwhile, outside the prison gates, the world keeps moving. Madeline relocated again, this time to a small town in Oregon. She keeps the boys out of the public eye. They go by different names now. They don't ask much about their mother anymore, and she doesn't volunteer. But in therapy, sometimes, the youngest mentions dreams. In them, there's always a bag, always heavy, always quiet. He says he can't see what's inside, but he always wakes up before it's opened. Rachel got engaged last spring, a quiet ceremony. No press. Her fiancé doesn't ask about Mark, not because he's insensitive, but because he knows the way grief haunts in loops, not lines. He gives her space, gives her silence when she needs it, and she tells him, on rare nights, that Mark wasn't perfect, but he was kind. And that's what she misses, kindness. Because in all the stories Red Hollow told afterward on Facebook threads, in whispered gossip, in long drunken arguments in the parking lot of Ray's Tavern, very few of them remembered the man who disappeared. They remembered the woman who did it. The how, the why, the creepiness of it. But Mark, he became a ghost. Historians still argue whether small-town murder cases end with resolution or ritual forgetting, whether justice is a clean conclusion or a smudged photograph left out in the rain. But one thing's clear, Lena made sure she wouldn't be forgotten, and she didn't care who had to vanish for that to happen. Inside her cell, she folds another bird, tucks it beside the others. 3 now, always 3, and one day, when no one is looking, she writes a single sentence on the back of the smallest one. Not a confession, not an apology, just 5 quiet words. They don't know the rest. She folds it tight, presses the wings flat, and sets it on the sill, facing out, always out. You're at the edge now. The town's quiet again. The trial's over. The interviews are archived. The reporters have stopped calling. Even the most vocal Facebook crusaders have moved on to the next controversy. But the story lingers like a stain on a shirt no one wears but no one throws away either. Red Hollow learned how to carry it, like a limp. You don't mention the kind of thing folks still whisper about in line at the pharmacy, or during awkward silences at Thanksgiving. You remember the woman who, you finish the sentence in your head, because everyone else is too polite or too afraid to say it out loud. Some folks say Lena just broke. Others say she was broken long before she came here. But either way, a man is dead, 2 children lost their mother, and the town lost the illusion that monsters knock. Sometimes they just live next door. Historians still argue whether communities are shaped more by what they build or what they bury. But Red Hollow, it buried something alive, and it still hums under the surface. There's no plaque, no memorial. Just an unmarked stretch of road where Mark's car was last seen. Just a house that no one will buy. Just a few lingering threads no one dares to tie together. But you remember them. The 3 bags, the grocery list. The list written in a trembling but steady hand. Drug plus control. Trash before sunrise. The quietest plan with the loudest consequence. And you wonder how many other people like Mark are out there right now, trying to help, trying to fix, blind to the trap because it doesn't look like a trap. It looks like a person, with kids, with a calm voice, with a problem. And how many of those people like Mark will never realize that their kindness was interpreted as currency? Mark wasn't reckless. He was lonely. Lena wasn't chaotic. She was calculating. And between the 2 of them, one never stood a chance. Back in prison, Lena still folds her birds, 3 a night. 1 big, 2 small. The guards don't bother her much. She's quiet. She makes no trouble. But every now and then, she'll say something odd, something that hangs in the air like dust in sunlight. Last month, while sweeping the corridor, she looked up and said, "He came to help." That was the mistake. No one asked who she meant. They didn't have to, because some truths don't need repeating. They just echo. And tonight, just like all those other nights before, it's quiet in Red Hollow. The house is dark. The past is heavy. And somewhere, beneath everything still standing, the story is still breathing. And now, it's time to let it all fade. You're safe now. There's nothing left to solve. Nothing left to chase. Close your eyes. Let the courtroom dissolve into darkness. Let the questions drift away like paper birds released into an evening breeze. You did your part. You listened. You held the weight of the truth for a while. And that's enough. Let the sound of the gravel road fade behind you. Let the creak of Lena's front door grow distant. Let Mark's car roll quietly out of sight, headlights dimming into memory. You're not there anymore. You're here, still, quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't need answers, just rest. Breathe in slowly, let it settle. There are no more verdicts, no more interviews, no more files to read or clocks to rewind. Just the hum of safety now. A soft, persistent rhythm like the way Mark drove, calm and steady, always choosing the back roads. You're okay. Let the last sentence drift. Some people carry secrets, others carry silence. But you can put both down. Just for tonight, just long enough to sleep.